Hi, everyone. Lisa Haven here. Well, President Trump and America's last stand is happening right now with regard to our U.S. election. And it all revolves around Texas, who has just filed with the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And right now, many states are jumping in on the bandwagon, including the president. And it has been docketed. This is huge for us. Look, if we can't have faith in our U.S. election, and we see all these states screaming about election integrity and what's going on and just mischievous dealings around it, then what do we have in the United States of America? So this absolutely needs to go through. And I think this is a final and good stand for the United States of America. And I'm going to show you everything from the motion that has been filed to all the states that are jumping in on the bandwagon. So you're going to want to listen to this. But before I do, just a quick break. Extraordinary high winds in the Midwest and northeastern U.S. have led to power outages. Over 800,000 people across the country have been impacted. Natural disasters like these is exactly why I prepare. And one of the best tools that I have in my toolbox is a backup solar bank at backupsolarbank.com. The Backup Solar Bank is portable backup energy that is essential in the event of some kind of disaster. It's the single most convenient way to charge your cell phone and other electronic devices from virtually anywhere. Unlike typical power banks, this one is completely charged by the sun. So you don't have to worry about batteries or wires. And right now, you can get it for 20% off using the code HAVEN20. So check it out at backupsolarbank.com. Again, that's backupsolarbank.com, or click in the description box below. Get one today. All right. Back to the broadcast. All right, so let's jump right into this thing so you guys can get all the details. Here we are on Fox28.com, and it's Texas files suit in U.S. Supreme Court against 4 states alleging they violated constitutional provisions in the 2020 election, and that was just recently published. But let's go on over to the actual motion that was filed by Texas, because this is where all the nitty-gritty stuff, because I don't want to hear the media side and what they're saying. I want to read it for myself. But here we are, the state of Texas versus Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Hallelujah. 4 swing states that just all went to Biden despite the massive improbability of that happening. But hey, I digress. Let's see what the actual motion is about and what's going on here. And it says, motion for leave to file bill of complaint pursuant 28 USC 1251A and this court's Rule 17, the state of Texas respectfully seeks leave to file the accompanying bill of complaint against Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, challenging their administration of the 2020 presidential election. And let me just pause. This is all about questioning, did you follow the Constitution with your rules and regulations, which is exactly what we need to call out. Because here's the thing. If Pennsylvania is allowed to make their own election laws, but nobody else is, or everybody else has to follow certain guidelines, then we've got a constitutional issue here, right? But they go on. As set forth in the accompanying brief and complaint, the 2020 election suffered from significant and unconstitutional irregularities, and that's the key, in the defendant of the states. Now, here are the things, and these are just kind of like a brief outline of the entire motion that is being filed. Here's the complaints they're bringing against them. Number 1, non-legislative actors purported amendments to states duly enacted election laws in violation of the electors clause. They were supposed to do things through the legislature, not through judicial, but they went through and said, oh, we're just going to skip the legislature and go through judicial. That's what they're talking about here. But it says, in violation of the electors clause, vesting state legislators with plenary authority regarding the appointment of presidential electors. There's certain laws that have to be followed that weren't being followed by these particular swing states, of course. Then here's another one here. Number 2, intrastate differences. That means inside the state, counties in the state each had different rules and regulation with regard to the election. That's what they're saying here. interstate differences in the treatment of votes with more favorable allotted to voters, whether lawful or unlawful, in areas administered by local government under democratic control and with populations with higher ratio of Democratic voters than any other areas of defended states. So what they're saying here is you had different rules, right? All passed in their by their judicial branch or whatever they're in, and you had in the name of COVID, right? But they had one county have different rules and regulations than another county, and the county that just so happened to be the county that they gave more lax, so to speak, right, were counties with a lot more Democrats in them than, say, ones that had more Republicans. Hello? This is good news that this is going through the Supreme Court, and it has been docketed, right? This is the second complaint that the state of Texas and other states, as you're going to see who have joined on, we have lots of those. I'm going to get into it. And third, the appearance of voting irregularities in the defendant states that would be consistent with the unconstitutional relaxation of ballot integrity protections in those states' election laws. That means there was a lot of irregularities that happened, questionable stuff and suspicious activity with the votes because you allowed such unconstitutional relaxation of ballot integrity. Now, these states all have a chance to reply to what's going on. And I'm going to show you Pennsylvania's reply in just a moment because they have already replied. But I want to focus a little bit more on this before I get there. And it says, all these flaws, even the violation of state election law, violate one or more of the federal requirements for election, i.e., they either violated the equal protection, due process, or the election clause. All these laws that were allowed to be made in all these other states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, they were allowed there, but no other states. And as you're going to see in a moment, they're going to claim, well, we did it because of COVID and because of the emergency. But the problem that Texas and others are having is they weren't allowed to do that. They didn't pass those clauses in their state, right? But it goes on, and thus arise federal law. And then they quote Bush versus Gore and kind of get into all of that, which is similar to some of the things that are happening here. And they say plaintiff state respectively submits that the foregoing types of electoral irregularities exceed the hanging Chad saga of the 2000 election in degree of their departure from both state and federal law. But it goes on a little bit. And I want to just point out some of the irregularities that are referenced in this particular document. But here it is. It says, Bill of Complaint. Our country stands at an important crossroads. Either the Constitution matters and must be followed. And this is why I call it a nuclear option, because this is either we're going to follow the Constitution or we're not. And we're a dead country. Basically, we're going full speed into communism. Even when some officials consider it inconvenient or out of date, or it is simply a piece of parchment on display at the National Archives. Freaking men. We ask the court to choose the former. It is not just a piece of paper. It is a living, active document, alive and well today, because this is the thing that saved our very country is the Constitution. Lawful elections are at the heart of our constitutional democracy. The public, and indeed the candidates themselves, have a compelling interest in ensuring that the selection of a president, any president, is legitimate. If that trust is lost, and the American experiment will founder, a dark cloud hangs over the 2020 election. Amen. Here's what we know. Using the COVID pandemic as justification, which is exactly what they did, government officials in these states of Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania usurped their legislative authority and unconstitutionally revised their state's election status. This is why President Trump has had such a hard time in all the courts, because they said, oh, well, we passed a law against that, or we passed a law against that because it's an emergency declaration for COVID-19. So all these laws can be going around. So President Trump's filing stuff, we have Sidney Powell filing stuff, but none of it's getting put through and all of it's getting thrown out because you have these laws that were unconstitutionally passed in Pennsylvania and other states, right? They accomplished these statutory revisions threw out executive fiat or friendly lawsuits, thereby weakening our ballot integrity. Finally, these same government officials flooded the defendant states with millions of ballots to be sent through mails or placed drop boxes, right, with little or no chain of custody or basically oversight, and at the same time weakened the strongest security measures protecting the integrity of our vote and verification witness requirements. This is massive. So thank God we have other states pointing it out. You can't make unconstitutional laws because of a crisis. And then no other state was allowed to do that. But we have so many irregularities that are actually pointed out. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit to the nature of the action. And I'm just going to hone in on a couple of these here. But here we have number 3, the unconstitutional changes open the door to election irregularities in various forms, right? That's huge. Number 4, as Justice Gorsuch observed recently, government is not free. They're not. To disregard the Constitution in times of crisis. Yet, recently during the COVID-19 pandemic, certain states, whoops, it went up. Yet recently during the COVID pandemic, certain states seem to have ignored these long settled principles. How can we rightfully start making all these rules and regulations in the name of a crisis and break our Constitution? But other states didn't do that, just a few. The few that are called out here in this report, right? Let's go on a little bit further to number 6 here. Defendant states also failed to segregate ballots in a manner that would permit accurate analysis to determine which ballots were cast in conformity with the legislative set rules and which were not. Why do you think they did that? Right? That were unconstitutional. So they didn't segregate the ballots, which is another reason why President Trump has had trouble fighting in the courts. There is absolutely something else going on. This is our final stand, folks. This is our final stand. And the good news is it's been docketed. Take a look here. And this is on GellerReport.com. Supreme Court adds Texas election fraud lawsuit against Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin to the docket. But they reject GOP's Pennsylvania lawsuit, right? They have denied a lot of lawsuits because they passed laws in Pennsylvania that are unconstitutional. So really the only ones that can challenge what's going on is Pennsylvania, is other states. And the Supreme Court got to take it, I believe. Got to take it, right? But thankfully, there's a lot of people jumping in. Here we have Louisiana joins Texas in motion against these states after the Supreme Court of the United States denies emergency injunction relief in Pennsylvania case. Louisiana say, hey, we're joining in on the action. And here's the thing. Now, since this has been filed, it's been docketed, and the states have to respond to what's going on, right? They all have to respond. And as of right now, Pennsylvania, from what is in this report, did respond. And here's what Pennsylvania said in regards to the filing there. And it's in this report here. And it says, the state of Pennsylvania has replied to the Texas lawsuit, arguing that it doesn't address Act 77, a 2019 statute which allows votes to cast mail-in ballots for any reason. Woo! Pennsylvania argues that Texas doesn't articulate how massive disenfranchisement of voters by tossed out the results of the election would accord with the due process clause, which requires the counting of votes cast in reasonable reliance on existing election rules, and that the case at hand would not result in a circuit split when 2 or more different circuit court of appeals might rule differently on the same legal issue, right? Pennsylvania is also arguing that Texas or anyone else had since 2019 to object to that act, which violates the doctrine of laches. So what they're basically saying is, we put these laws in place, just prior to, and you could have said something about it then, but since you didn't say anything about it then and you're bringing it up now, well, it's a moot point, basically, right? That's what they're attempting to say in their response. But thankfully, it has been filed and docked with the court. Look, you can't use a crisis for your own personal gain. And that's what all these states have done. And then meanwhile, other states weren't allowed to do the same. This is not okay to have one rights for one state and different rights for another state with regard to our election when you're all supposed to have similar rules for that, right? But thankfully, there's more joining on the bandwagon. IndyStar.com, Indiana. AG, elect Rokita calls on Supreme Court to hear Texas's lawsuit alleging election fraud. So they're all saying, you need to hear this, you need to hear this. Here we have Fox News. Missouri joins fight alongside Texas to challenge election before Supreme Court. Schmidt says he'll help lead the effort in supporting Texas's filing. Then we also have Arkansas here. This is on THV11.com. Arkansas Attorney General shows support for Texas lawsuit challenging election results in battleground states. Then we also have Geller Report. Arkansas, which you just saw, Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi, South Carolina, South Dakota all announced they've joined Texas election fraud lawsuit on the SCOTUS's docket. And finally, President Trump, this is on Fox News, just came out. Trump touts Texas Supreme Court case as the big one, and we will be intervening. At least 3 more states are backing the challenge to results there in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Hallelujah, right? This is really, 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 really good news for us. This is our stand. And let me tell you something. The Supreme Court needs to hear it through its entirety, needs to look through that information, and they need to do right by the American people. Because I tell you what, if it's not up there and they don't listen to it, then you're going to tick off hundreds of millions of people all across the globe, and at least 80 million here in the United States of America. Because we've been reading and studying what's going on, and let me just say, there's a lot of crazy activity. But if we want to build up the integrity in our election, then we should be allowed to question our election. You see, because that's the thing, right? Here's what I want to say, and I think this is an important point, okay? When you're not allowed to question something, we're not allowed to question the election right now, according to Google, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, that kind of thing, right? Then it's no longer about the evidence or the facts. It is about authoritarian propaganda. When we can't question the facts, then the only other alternative is authoritarian propaganda. You decide where we're at. Anyhow, please don't forget to get on over to restrictedrepublic.com. Like I said before, we are running a special only for a limited time, just through Christmas, but it's $20 off an entire year. This is the cheapest that we've done for an entire year, but use the code 20 and the 20 off, which is the number 20 and the word off, and you can get that on the annual. This is a great deal, and we also have a monthly subscription for those who want to try it out, and a 14-day free trial, no matter if you try the year or if you do the monthly. So check it out today and get that unrestricted content that you've long been looking for. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Lisa Haven, signing out.